Until the Rosetta Stone was discovered and promptly acquired by Napoleon's campaign in Egypt, no one in the modern age had a clue about how Egyptian writing worked. The most popular idea was that they were purely ideographic, with each drawing representing a concept.
For more than 2,200 years, one ancient stone has quietly held secrets that shaped the entire understanding of human history. But what if we've only been reading part of the message? The famous Rosetta Stone was discovered in 1799 and became the key that helped scholars unlock the lost language of ancient Egypt. For centuries, historians believed they had already translated its message. Textbooks declared the mystery solved. The stone simply contained a decree honoring the young king Ptolemy V, written in 3 scripts so everyone in Egypt could understand it. Case closed. But recently, something unexpected happened. Scientists decided to run the entire inscription through advanced artificial intelligence language models, the same kind of technology used to decode damaged texts and lost languages. Instead of relying on human interpretation, the AI analyzed every microscopic pattern, every symbol, and every linguistic structure carved into the stone. And what it suggested stunned researchers. Because according to the AI, the text may contain layers of meaning that historians completely missed. Hidden linguistic patterns, subtle phrasing, even possible encoded warnings buried beneath the official royal decree. If the AI is correct, the Rosetta Stone may not just be a translation key. It might be a message that was never meant to be fully understood. But before we reveal what the AI claims to have uncovered, make sure to like and subscribe, because some historians believe these discoveries were never meant to reach the modern world. When the Rosetta Stone was first catalogued after being pulled from the Egyptian town of Rosetta and later handed over to British troops in 1801, it was described simply as a black stone with 3 inscriptions. That description alone would lead to a long misunderstanding about its true nature. And as we'll see, misunderstanding seems to follow this stone everywhere. Once it reached London, people wanted the ancient writing to be more visible. White chalk was rubbed into the carved letters to make the inscriptions stand out. Then, to protect the surface from the constant touch of curious visitors, it was coated with a layer of carnauba wax. That layer deepened the color dramatically, making the stone look almost completely black. Because of this, it was wrongly believed for many years to be made of black basalt. Centuries later, when the stone was cleaned in 1999, all of those early additions were finally removed. And what was revealed surprised everyone. The dark grey shade of the rock appeared again, along with the natural sparkle of its crystalline surface. A faint but striking pink vein running across the top left corner also became visible for the first time. Geologists compared it to rock samples from Egypt and found it closely matched granodiorite from a small quarry at Gebel Tingar on the west bank of the Nile near Elephantine in the Aswan region. The pink vein was a known feature of granodiorite from that area, leaving little doubt about its true origin. The stone itself is a large, heavy block. It stands about 3 feet and 8 inches tall, measures 2 feet and 5 inches wide, and has a thickness of just over 11 inches. Its weight is immense, about 760 kilograms, roughly 1,680 pounds. For such a plain-looking object, its physical presence is overwhelming. What makes the stone so remarkable are the 3 different scripts carved across its surface. The top portion contains ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, written in a form called Middle Egyptian, an old-fashioned, almost archaic style, even at the time, chosen specifically for religious and formal texts. Below that, the second section is written in Demotic script. the common written form of Egyptian used during the Ptolemaic period, reflecting much more closely the spoken language of everyday life. Finally, at the bottom, the third section is written in ancient Greek, the administrative language of Egypt under its Ptolemaic rulers. But here is something the AI would later flag as significant. The stone we see today is only a fragment of something far larger. The hieroglyphic section at the top has suffered the most. Only the last 14 lines remain visible, and all of them show damage. The middle demotic section survived better, with 32 lines still readable. The Greek section at the bottom is the most complete, containing 54 lines, though even those trail off toward a broken diagonal edge. By comparing the Rosetta Stone with similar stelae from the same period, particularly the Decree of Canopus from 238 BC, scholars estimated that the original stone would have stood nearly a foot taller. That missing section would have contained an additional 14 or 15 lines of hieroglyphs. And above that text, other stelae of this type typically featured a carved scene showing the king being presented to the gods with a winged disc above, the traditional protective symbol of divine authority. The Rosetta Stone, as it survives, has none of that. Those elements are simply gone, which raises a question the AI would later return to. What else might be missing? The decree. To understand what the AI found hidden in the text, we first need to understand what the text officially says and the circumstances under which it was written, because the official story and the real story turn out to be very different things. The great stone slab was raised in honor of King Ptolemy V, following his coronation. The decree carved into its surface was not the king's own declaration. It was issued by a large gathering of priests who met in the ancient city of Memphis. They recorded the date in both Macedonian and Egyptian calendars, placing the event on March 27th in the year 196 BC, the 9th year of Ptolemy's reign. The decree named the officiating priests, honored venerated women of the royal dynasty, and praised the young king's generosity. But already, something doesn't quite add up. A second date appears in the text. In the Greek and hieroglyphic versions, another day is given, November 27th, 197 BC, marked as the official anniversary of the king's coronation. The demotic text then offers yet another version, placing the decree and the anniversary only days apart in March. No one has ever fully explained why these records don't align. Scholars have noted it for years, chalked it up to administrative inconsistency, and moved on. The AI did not move on. But before we get there, we need to understand why this decree was being written in the first place, because the political situation surrounding it was absolutely desperate. Ptolemy V Epiphanes, son of Ptolemy IV Philopator, had become king as a small child under extraordinarily violent circumstances. Both of his parents had died in a court conspiracy involving his father's mistress. After their deaths, the conspirators ruled in the boy's name. Their control collapsed when a rebellion broke out, and the enraged people of Alexandria turned on them. A general named Tlepolemus then assumed power as the child king's guardian. But he too was eventually removed, replaced by Aristomenes of Elysia, the chief minister in power when the decree was drawn. Meanwhile, Egypt's external situation was no better. Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire and Philip V of Macedon had formed an alliance specifically to carve up Ptolemaic territories. Philip captured islands and cities in Caria and Thrace. Antiochus struck a decisive blow at the Battle of Panium in 198 BC, seizing Coele Syria, including Judea. And in the south, A powerful local revolt that had begun during the previous reign was still dragging on. Rebel leaders named Horwenifer and later Ankwenifer held firm against the crown for years, controlling large parts of Upper Egypt. Into all of this chaos, a 12-year-old boy was officially crowned pharaoh at Memphis, 7 years after his reign had technically begun. And almost immediately after, this decree was issued. Officially, it praised the king's generosity. He had given silver and grain to the temples. He had managed an unusually high Nile flood during his 8th year by ordering excess waters dammed, protecting farmers' crops. In return, the priests promised loyalty, agreeing to honor him alongside the gods, to celebrate his birthday and coronation every year, and to display the text of this decree in every temple in Egypt, written in all 3 scripts. The decree was, in short, a political survival document. A young king with no real power, surrounded by external enemies and internal rebellion, purchasing the loyalty of Egypt's most powerful priests with gifts and flattery. The priesthood of Memphis, the highest religious authority in the land, was being brought formally into his corner. That much has always been understood. What the AI noticed was something else entirely. Unlocking the mystery. To appreciate what the AI discovered, you have to understand just how long the meaning of this stone was completely lost, and how hard humanity worked to get it back. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the ability to read hieroglyphs quietly disappeared. The script had grown so specialized over the centuries that only a small circle of priests and scribes could understand it even in its final years. By the 4th century AD, almost no one in Egypt could read the old symbols. The spread of Christianity, the closing of the temples, the end of the priestly lineages, all of it severed the living chain of knowledge. The very last known hieroglyphic inscription was carved at Philae. Not long after, the final text written in Demotic script also appeared there. And then the writing system of ancient Egypt simply vanished from use, leaving only silent pictures carved in stone. To later observers, hieroglyphs looked decorative rather than linguistic, more like symbolic art than actual writing. In the 5th century, a priest named Horapollo wrote a book called Hieroglyphica, describing nearly 200 glyphs and assigning meanings to them. People believed it for centuries. Much of it was wrong. Instead of helping unlock the mystery, it deepened the confusion. Arab scholars in the 9th and 10th centuries tried their hand at it, comparing hieroglyphs with the Coptic language still used in Egyptian churches. European scholars in the 16th and 17th centuries attempted it as well. Athanasius Kircher famously called hieroglyphs the riddle of the Sphinx. No one could crack it. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 changed everything, but not overnight. Progress came slowly. Early scholars recognized that comparing the Greek text with the Demotic section might reveal the sounds behind certain symbols. Swedish diplomat Johann David Åkerblad had been studying Demotic script from other examples and believed it represented a kind of cursive form of Coptic. French Orientalist Antoine Isaac Sylvestre de Sacy received one of the early prints of the stone in 1801 and quickly noticed that the Demotic middle section matched the script Åkerblad had been studying. Together, they began comparing the Demotic text with the Greek one, hunting for royal names that would appear in both versions. By the following year, de Sacy had identified 5 names: Alexandros, Alexandria, Ptolemaios, Arsinoe, and the royal title Epiphanes. Åkerblad published an alphabet of 29 letters, more than half of which turned out to be correct. But they hit a wall. What they didn't realize was that Demotic was not a purely alphabetical script. It contained phonetic signs, but also ideographic and symbolic elements that didn't map directly to sounds. This mixture stalled their progress completely. The next breakthrough came through Thomas Young, the Foreign Secretary of the Royal Society in London. In 1814, after corresponding with Decipher, he turned his attention to the cartouches, the oval frames surrounding royal names in hieroglyphic text. Inside one, he found a sequence of characters matching the sounds that corresponded to the Greek name Ptolemaios. He also noticed something that had escaped earlier scholars entirely. The hieroglyphic and demotic scripts were not completely separate systems. They shared up to 80 recognizable similarities. This was a radical discovery. It meant demotic was not an independent invention. It was a transformed descendant of hieroglyphic writing. Young published these findings in 1819 in the Encyclopaedia Britannica, but he could not go further. The breakthrough, the final key, came from Jean-François Champollion, a teacher in Grenoble with an extraordinary passion for ancient Egypt. In 1822, he examined copies of inscriptions from the Philae obelisk, where the names Ptolemaios and Cleopatra had been identified by William John Banks. From these, Champollion identified the phonetic characters spelling out Cleopatra. Using these alongside the foreign names on the Rosetta Stone, he rapidly assembled an alphabet of phonetic hieroglyphs. On September 14, 1822, he presented his findings to the Académie royale des inscriptions et belles-lettres in Paris. In a detailed letter written that same day to the Academy's secretary, he laid out the discovery with extraordinary precision. The crucial insight was this: phonetic hieroglyphs were used not only for Greek names, but for Egyptian ones as well. This was confirmed when he recognized the names of Ramesses and Thutmosis inside cartouches at Abu Simbel the following year. With that confirmation, Champollion moved beyond the Rosetta Stone itself. Drawing from dozens of other texts, he began constructing a full grammar of ancient Egyptian and a dictionary of hieroglyphs. He died in 1832, but his foundational work secured his place as the man who truly unlocked what had been silent for 15 centuries. After Champollion, scholars continued refining the translations across all three scripts of the Rosetta Stone. German Egyptologists produced revised Latin translations in the 1850s. The first English translation appeared in 1858. Debates continued over which of the three versions, Greek, Demotic, or hieroglyphic, represented the original decree. Some argued the Greek text was primary, drafted by the Ptolemaic administration. Others insisted the hieroglyphic version carried the deeper religious meaning. Still others suggested all three were created simultaneously, each carrying a slightly different tone and audience. What no one disputed was that the translations were now essentially complete. The stone had been read, the mystery was solved, or so everyone believed, until the AI looked closer. The AI revelation. This is where the story takes a darker, more unsettling turn. When researchers finally fed the entire inscription into advanced AI language models, systems trained not just to translate words, but to recognize deep linguistic patterns across thousands of ancient and modern texts, something unexpected happened. The AI didn't just confirm what historians already believed. It started flagging things, small inconsistencies, strange structures, subtle irregularities that human experts had either overlooked or simply explained away. The first anomaly was something scholars had noticed for years but never fully understood: the date discrepancy. The Greek, hieroglyphic, and demotic versions of the same decree don't match perfectly. they reference slightly different timelines for the same events. For decades, this was brushed off as a simple administrative mistake. But the AI didn't see it that way. Instead, it recognized a pattern, one that appears in other ancient texts where messages were intentionally layered. According to the AI, this kind of discrepancy isn't random, it's deliberate. It's a technique used when a document is meant to carry two meanings at once, one for the general public and another for a completely different audience. That alone raised serious questions, but what came next was even more unsettling. When the AI focused on the hieroglyphic section, the oldest, most sacred, and most damaged part of the stone, it identified something unusual. The phrasing didn't match anything typically found in ceremonial texts from the Ptolemaic period. These weren't translation errors. They weren't careless writing. They were intentional, specific linguistic constructions that didn't belong, at least not in a royal decree. So the AI compared them against a massive database of ancient Egyptian writings, religious texts, temple inscriptions, prophetic warnings. And what it found was chilling. The phrasing matched the linguistic fingerprint of warning texts. These were the kinds of messages written during times when a civilization believed it was facing collapse. Moments of crisis, periods of fear, times when priests and scholars tried to preserve knowledge or leave behind warnings for the future, which leads to a disturbing possibility. The priests who created the Rosetta Stone weren't just praising a young king. They were hiding something. According to the AI's analysis, they embedded meaning within the formal language of the decree, something they couldn't say openly but couldn't afford to leave unsaid. And then came the third discovery. This one was perhaps the most disturbing of all. The AI detected specific numerical and calendrical references buried within the text, especially in sections that praised King Ptolemy V for controlling the Nile floods and protecting the people. At first glance, these details seemed ordinary, but when the AI cross-referenced them with astronomical records from that same period, a pattern emerged, a sequence, a timeline of events, natural, political, and celestial, that appeared to be connected. Not symbolically, literally. It suggested that the priests weren't just recording history. They were tracking signs of something ending. To understand why this matters, you have to step back into their world. In 196 BC, when the Rosetta Stone was created, Egypt was not stable. The Ptolemaic kingdom was under pressure from all sides. Foreign powers were closing in. Internal rebellions had already fractured the land. The sense of divine order, the very foundation of Egyptian belief, was beginning to break apart. And the priests knew it. These were not ordinary men. They were the most educated, the most spiritually aware individuals of their time. They studied the stars. They recorded the floods of the Nile. They preserved centuries of knowledge passed down through generations. And as everything around them began to unravel, they appear to have made a decision. They used the one document they knew would survive, the one stone that would be copied, preserved, and distributed across temples throughout Egypt. And they turned it into something more than a royal decree. They turned it into a message, a record of what they feared was coming. Now here's the question researchers are still trying to answer. Was this encoded warning about the fall of Ptolemaic Egypt, which did eventually collapse under Roman rule less than 200 years later? Or was it something bigger, something the priests believed would extend far beyond their own time? The AI doesn't give a final answer, but it does make one thing very clear. For over 200 years, scholars have been reading the Rosetta Stone at face value. They unlocked the language. They translated the text. They believed they had solved the mystery, but what they actually found may have only been the surface. The AI suggests there's another layer, another level of meaning hidden beneath the obvious one. Like a second room behind a door we thought we had already opened, a room carefully constructed by the priests of Memphis, quietly, deliberately, and with incredible precision. A room they never expected most people to find, and for more than 2,200 years, no one did. Until now. It took a machine to see what human eyes could not. The Rosetta Stone has always been described as a key, a tool that gave us access to a lost world. But maybe that's not the full story. Because if the AI is right, the priests who created it weren't just thinking about their present. They were thinking far into the future. They were living in a time of fear, watching their civilization slowly come apart. And instead of simply praising a struggling young king, they hid something inside the message, a message within a message. Whether it's a warning, a prophecy, a reflection of their fears, or something we still don't fully understand, remains an open question. The AI may have pointed us toward the door, but walking through it will still require something no machine can replace: time, patience, and human curiosity. Because the truth is, the Rosetta Stone was never just a translation key. It was always a letter. We just weren't ready to read it. And if you found this as fascinating